At the same time, confusion engulfs the identity of a company pre-qualified by the Kenya Medical Supplies Authority, KEMSA, which appears to be non-existent on the database of the registrar of companies, raising questions as to the authenticity of the supplier that was on the verge of winning part of a 3.7 billion shilling tender. Now, a search for Shobikaa Impex now returns that no such business exists. This at a time the Global Fund has taken away the tender to procure over 10 million treated mosquito nets over what the fund terms inconsistent evaluation of tenders that it now finds no bidder qualified to supply. Our very own Sam Gituku reports on the chronology of events that lasted 6 months with no way forward over nets meant for malaria-infested zones.
The Kenya Medical Supplies Authority had assessed and found 2 companies fit to supply the mosquito nets. They are Shobikaa Impex and Patek East Africa Limited. A search on the Registrar of Companies portal shows that Patek East Africa was registered in June 2006 and is owned by 2 directors, Priska Chepleting and Wilson Joseph Kisa. Shobikaa Impex, however, is unavailable on the portal, the system returning a message with no business found matching your criteria. Questions abound as to whether this is a system error or whether the company has never existed or were the details removed from the radar of public search. The Global Fund, however, was adamant that the 2 companies that KEMSA has settled on failed to meet mandatory requirements and should not have proceeded to technical, financial and post-qualification phase. The procurement of mosquito nets has been a long and winding escapade involving the Ministry of Health, the National Treasury, KEMSA and the Global Fund, who are the sponsor. It dates back to November 2022, when the National Treasury requested KEMSA to procure 12.6 million treated mosquito nets for the government. It later became apparent that the finances available would not suffice for the required quantity. On 24th of January this year, Treasury yielded and advised KEMSA to reduce the quantity to 10.2 million nets. At the end of January, the international open tender for the nets was launched with a bid deadline set for 23rd of February. However, 2 days to the close of the tender, Public Health and Professional Standards Principal Secretary Josephine Mburu wrote to KEMSA calling for correction of inconsistencies in the specifications of the nets required. A day after, KEMSA wrote to the Global Fund communicating extension of the bidding period by 2 weeks to 10th of March to allow time for bidders to revise the applications. On the 24th of February, however, a day after the initial deadline, the National Treasury wrote back to KEMSA overruling PS Mburu's directive to correct the tender document. Despite the reversal, the tender bidding period remained on 10th of March. By the end of that day, 16 bids had been received and were evaluated. KEMSA's Tender Evaluation Committee submitted its report on 6th of April, reporting that 11 companies had been found unresponsive, meaning they didn't qualify, while 5 were clear to proceed to the next stage. Ultimately, KEMSA settled on the 2 companies, Patek East Africa and Shobikaa Impex. The Global Fund, however, reviewed KEMSA's decisions and found that only 2 companies should have proceeded from the first phase, and they were not those chosen by KEMSA. Still, upon full assessment, none of the 16 bidders were found to pass the sample evaluation, meaning none should supply anything to KEMSA. On the 25th of April, Global Fund documented its cancellation of the entire process. The Global Fund has since declared that the procurement will be done by wambo.org, its procurement arm. The fund gives reasons that another international open tender, in accordance with Kenyan laws, would take time, and that the nets must arrive in good time for the November 2023 campaign, a year since the first request was made by the Kenyan Treasury. Sam Gituku, Citizen TV.